us welcome our first panel discussion for today, Building the ASEAN Ecosystem in Circular Economy, moderated by Mr. Rizwi Woon, partner RHT Law Asia. We will examine how companies can operationalize principles of circular economy and waste reduction through recycling and sustainable packaging, as well as look at redefining consumer culture and consumption behavior to minimize waste. Rizwi is one of the founding members of RHT Law Asia and acting head of intellectual property and technology practice with over 20 years of experience. He covers developments in telecommunication sector, fashion and luxury, food and beverage, and gaming. Being regarded as one of the highly acclaimed experts within Singapore and the region, Rizwi handles the creation, protection, commercialization, and enforcement of intellectual property, as well as advising on legal and regulatory aspects of technology-related matters, with particular emphasis on data protection, cybersecurity, and competition law issues. Joining him on the panel are Professor Siram Ramakrishna, Chair, Circular Economy Task Force, National University of Singapore; Nilamani Muthukumar, Group CFO, Olam Group Limited; and Catherine Chan, Director of Business Development, the Hong Kong Research Institute of Textiles and Apparel. A big welcome to our esteemed panelists. Over to you, Rizwi and panelists.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Rizwi. I'll be your moderator for this morning's panel. I'm a partner from RHT Law Asia LLP, specializing in IP and technology. But significantly for today's panel, I also head our consumer brands in industry group practice, which covers the behavior, mindset, and regulations governing consumer products. This morning, I'm very happy to have with me an esteemed panel. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Catherine. She's from the Hong Kong Research Institute of Textiles and Apparels. Prof. Siram, he heads the Circular Economy Task Force from the National University of Singapore. And next to me is Muthu. He's Group CFO of Olam Group. Warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. So, to begin with, this morning, we are talking about the circular economy, what it means. In fact, before we even go there, what is it all about? What does it mean? And how can it help with the environment? So maybe I will start out with Prof. Prof, maybe you can help us kick things off with what your views are on the circular economy and what is currently being done.
Thank you, Rizvi. I appreciate Gale Forum as well as you choosing this topic, circular economy, which is becoming extremely important for nations around the world. In a short definition of circular economy, it is about keeping resources in use as long as possible, with the less amount of waste being put into the atmosphere, soil, and oceans. The world has recognized that materials are linked to the greenhouse gas emissions. Roughly more than 20% of emissions are linked to materials production and utilization. Materials also related to social costs, human health effects. Hence, various governments, including Singapore and ASEAN countries, taking certain measures, policy measures, regulatory measures, as well as laws put in place. An excellent example is extended producer responsibility, which is already being in place in Singapore for particular waste sectors. So idea behind this policy measure is to systematically identify waste streams and find mechanisms to increase the recycling rates. So in nutshell, circular economy aims to improve the environment, reduce the climate change effects, and make sure the resources are available for the current generation as well as the future generation, because resources are finite and planet Earth cannot provide for a growing consumption, a worldwide increase in the need for resources.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. Okay, over to Catherine. Catherine, can I have your views on the circular economy and what it means to you?
First of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. Appreciate Professor's explanation. It helped me to better understand and explain in future on what circularity means. For us, being in the textile and apparel industry, circular economy's meaning, which actually resonates to Professor's description just now, to extend the product use as long as possible, reduce new materials production, and definitely in the end reduce waste to be landfilled or incinerated. Textile and apparel to every one of us is an essential that we use every day. And every one of us has been used to our lifestyle having purchase new items for our wardrobe once in a while, whether it's essential materials or fashionable items. It's very easy and just generally accessible with nowadays internet, e-commerce being so popular. It increased a lot of purchase very, very easily. And I think circular economy also nowadays means to all the consumers that we have to be responsible in our purchasing, and not only the use of the materials or products, but also it should start in the earlier stage when we make the purchase. Do we really need that item? Or can we postpone our purchase for some time? Or can we actually make change of our existing product at home and bring newness to ourselves and make ourselves happy without really making the new purchase? And then also, when we make the purchase, then we should also be aware of what is available in the market. There are increasing number of recycled materials, whether from the material or the feedstock point of view. There are also second-hand items available in the market. I think these all triggers a lot of thinking and kind of update all of our mindsets a bit from purchase and use of textile items. And in the industry, a lot technology and innovations has been done and developed to support this circularity or circular economy for fashion and apparel. From whether renewable resources or feedstock to be created, not only the synthetics from fossil fuel feedstock. There are science looking into using agricultural waste or different renewable resources in making items or textiles for use of garments and apparel. And also a lot of technologies or process engineering has been going on, reduce the consumption of energy, water, and other resources during the production time as well. And also, we see a lot of innovations also are being worked on in now waste management, because there are a lot of textile waste a year, over 100 tons a day of textile waste. It's being produced around the world. And therefore, a lot of innovation or technology is being looked into, and how to reduce the waste to be dumped in the soil and ocean by actually thinking from the design of the original garments stage, then to make it easier for the garment to be recycled or reused or upcycled. And yeah, so I think it covers a lot of areas, and quite a number of technologies are available in the markets. And I see continuous efforts are being invested in bringing up more upscale and available technologies.
Now, Muthu, maybe we'll hear from you. What are your views on the circular economy? And maybe I will just push this forward to say, do you think that currently enough is being done?
Thank you, Rizvi. Thank you, the fellow panelists. I think the way they have defined more from an overall circular economy definition, what Prof talked about, and from Catherine, who looked at specific textile industry. I represent OLAM Group. We are primarily in food and agricultural industry. We are in 67 countries, handling more than 47 agricultural commodities. And last year in 2021, we moved roughly 45 million tons of food essentials across the world. So we at OLAM think of circular economy more broadly in terms of reducing food loss and wastage. Globally, we believe that at least a third of food that is produced is wasted because of one, poor logistics and infrastructure in emerging markets, in developing countries where food is produced from farming to market. The second is in developed countries, at least a third of food is wasted on the table, and that's a lifestyle issue. What we can influence as a large food and agricultural producer and originator and merchandiser. Incidentally, we are the second largest cotton producer in the world and merchandiser in the world, essential raw material to what Catherine was talking about of the textile industry. We believe that we can seriously impact livelihood of farmers across the world by giving them better agronomy practices, providing an essential infrastructure and logistics for them to reduce food wastage. And there we are looking at using sustainability and digital technology to disintermediate the supply chain and cut the middlemen and go to the farmer directly and take the produce faster and give more than a fair share of the price of the commodity, agricultural commodity that the farmer is producing. That way make them prosperous. At the same time, make the food move up the supply chain, value chain, to the end user faster and fresher. So that is something which we believe will reduce a significant amount of food production requirement, because all of us are talking about the world is growing, the population is growing, we have to feed another 2 billion people by 2050, we have finite resources, there is a climate change challenge, the globe is getting warmer. So how do we produce more food by using less resources? While that is true, we also firmly believe by reducing food loss and wastage, that will equally have, if not more, positive impact on climate change. And many of us have subscribed to 1.5 degrees centigrade climate change target, but many companies do not know how to do that. And that is a real challenge where many CEOs have subscribed to this target, but without knowing how to go about it. And to answer Rizvi's question, I don't think there is enough that is being done. There is enough awareness that has been created in the last 2-3 years, but I don't think people have enough clarity on how to go about it to achieve their objective and their commitment.
Thank you, Muthu. Okay. I must say that as a lawyer, I am quite encouraged by recent legislation that we have seen in different countries that have been a major factor in motivating consumers to change their habits. I can think of South Korea and France in terms of food waste management and how changes in the law in terms of the obligation, creating a new obligation to reduce food waste, to report food waste, to recycle and minimize food waste has resulted in a drastic change in the lifestyle, drastic change in social habits, and most importantly, I think to address some of the issues raised by Muthu, change in the mindset, change in the conduct and the behavior of consumers. Now, of course, legislation as a motivating factor to influence conduct seems to be a very drastic way to change. But I think from the little results that we have seen, I think that it is rather effective, at least in terms of food waste management. Now, recently we've been helping clients with mandatory packaging reporting requirements in Singapore. And one of the takeaways I've had when helping clients with such new obligations is actually creating the awareness of the sheer amount of plastic and other kinds of materials used in packaging. Okay, so in this respect, I guess if you wanted to effect change and you want to influence a change in the mindset, if you wanted to create more awareness and if you want to create, educate more people to learn more about how to be more environmentally friendly, environmentally conscious, and to be more aware of how much of an adverse and dangerous impact these some of the current practices that we are having. I think legislation is one way of effective such a change, and I'm very encouraged by the results I've seen so far. Now, of course, change, just like everything else, usually comes at a cost. Okay, now cost is just one of the challenges. So, what I would like to ask the panel next would be, what are some of the challenges that you see, right, in terms of effecting change to the mindset, change to the awareness, change in the way we want to effect a more, we want to put into place a more effective circular economy. So if I can direct this to Muthu, right, in terms of challenges to operational matters, right? Maybe you can share with us some of your views on what are some of the challenges and what are some of the possible solutions that can be put into place to overcome such challenges. Then after that, I will move on to Catherine, because I believe that you have shared before some views on the financial challenges. And then I will round it off with the views of Prof on systemic challenges. Okay, so maybe we start with Muthu.
Oh, thank you, Rizvi. So if you have to clearly look at the challenges, there are many. And as I had earlier alluded to, there is a significant awareness of the requirement to change to ensure that we have a world for the future. Now, having simplistically said that, how do we go about it is indeed a challenge. When you are looking at, for example, in various countries where we are operating, and we want to ensure that there is less food loss from the farm gate to the market. Now, what are we looking at? We want the farmers to get induced to produce more food, become prosperous, so that they are encouraged not only in the current generation, but also in the future generation, that they continue to farm and produce more food. Now, for that, they need access to finance. Now, many countries have legislations which say that the banks have to provide microfinance at an affordable rate so that they don't go to money lenders and borrow at significantly higher interest rates and perennially be in debt. Now, the cost of servicing the last mile by the banks are so high that they are unable to service the farmers what they call as microfinancing. We as an operator, as Rizvi is talking about, help bridge this last mile between the banks and the farmers across the world. Today, we directly or indirectly impact more than 4 million farmers across the world. And our commitment, our purpose is to have more food production availability for all and also increase the livelihood of farmers to become more prosperous. Now, the challenges that we see is first access to finance that I talked about. Second is educating farmers in using better agronomy practices, having an ability to rotate crops, and ensuring that we are fixing the topsoil across the world. Today, by having the same crop being produced on a repetitive basis, you're significantly degenerating the topsoil and depriving the soil of essential nutrients, including nitrogen. Nitrogen is an important aspect of the soil to fix carbon. And if you don't have enough nitrogen in the soil, we are automatically allowing more greenhouse gas emissions happen. So our endeavor is to ensure that the farmers are educated on a continuous basis, and that is a big challenge. Because, again, as Rizvi and Prof are alluding to, any change is going to come at a cost, and any change comes with a resistance. So how do we ensure that there are enough private NGOs, private players, NGOs, governmental agencies join hands together to ensure that we are able to continuously educate farmers on better agronomy practices that will ensure that we are able to not only provide better livelihood for them, but also have more food production, less food loss, and more importantly, fix the topsoil to ensure lesser greenhouse gas emissions in the planet.
Okay, thanks, Muthu. So, as I mentioned just now, maybe Catherine, you can elaborate a little bit on some of the financial challenges that you have come across in your work.
Yeah, let me explain a little bit from the a step back. So we in Hong Kong Retail, Hong Kong Research Institute for Textiles and Apparel, we are a NGO and one of the R&D centers under the Hong Kong government, focusing on textile and apparel. So we are supported by the government funding certain developments on textile and apparel. And sustainability is one of our main pillars of our research themes. So through us, we work with different academia, our own researchers, also professors and different experts in institutes, and also very importantly is the industry stakeholders themselves, including retail brands, manufacturer, and factories. So with this government funding in doing all these research and development projects, it supports very well to work on new invention, new ideas, proof of concept, to kind of bring these new technologies into the industry for further development. So I think this is very important when we talk about circular economy, because it is something that requires a lot of science and technology in order to make things work. Circular economy involves a lot of recycling, and recycling textile, it's also very complicated because it has many different type of materials, mixed blends, and also each piece of garments might have different chemicals and different dyes, different finishing all these very, very complicated science. So in order to support recycling of the textile materials, a very big variety of technologies needs to be developed. And as Mut mentioned, whenever there's change, it has a cost. So I think from some funding supporting sustainability development, circularity research, I think this is a very important first step as a start. Once the proof of concept is there, the next challenge is to bring it upscale in the industrial level. And it is another change. Yeah. So I'm sure all of you are aware, like whenever there is new science, new technology, when it works in the lab, it doesn't mean that it can work in the factory. And it needs a lot of different optimization, engineering work to bring it upscale. So that also requires a lot of financial support. So I'm happy to see different financial institutes are supporting green initiatives or sustainability programs to businesses and support their development in kind of upscaling these sustainable solutions. But then it's still, I think it still needs continuous support and perhaps how should I call it, the more ease in applying for these financial investments from different financial institutions in order to make it easier for businesses to take the first step. Usually the one being first, it's very difficult because for the new companies to invest in new technology, they need quite some confidence level to make sure they are investing in the right direction, in the right technology, because there's no market for it, because basically the technology is not there in the market yet. Yeah, so even though we are talking about sustainability, being environmental friendly every day, but still whenever we talk about market demand, it's still very uncertain. It's easier said than done. So I think for businesses who are willing to make the first step in being the first supplier of these sustainable alternatives, it needs a lot of encouragement and support in order to bring it to the market. When market is available, then it gets a wider scope of audience and user, and then it will further expand. And then it will attract more investments, and it helps to, then it will further bring the cost down because of economies of scales, and then improvement of technologies, while after a certain time of running this technology, then further upscaling or improvement would be available. So all these challenges, it's quite difficult in the textile and garment industry because we know that generally the supply or the manufacturing step takes place in the East, in Asia mostly, or the less developed countries, which means it needs more support in financial to bring in new and updated equipment and technologies in order to be efficient and to be able to produce sustainably. And we are aware of a lot of different issues lately on power supply in order, and also wastewater discharge. All these issues needs financial support to improve. So requires a lot of investments from the very upstream in the value chain. And the scale of production, it's actually very big. So when we talk about huge investments, it's not so easy to get support. That's why I would be very happy to see more financial institutions to offer different package or different investment fundings to different businesses who is willing to participate in the sustainability production improvements.
Thank you, Catherine. Now, Prof, I'm sure from where you sit, you must have lots of war stories on the challenges that are present to having a more, shall we say, effective circular economy. So maybe you share your views on maybe from a systemic point of view, whether there are any challenges, and if so, what are some possible solutions that maybe you can suggest?
Thank you, Rizvi. You're right. As a professor, I can express a little bit challenging views compared to my other speakers. It's a privileged position, and thank you for that. We are talking about circular economy in 21st century, year 2022. For any fundamental change in this time and age, three things have to go in hand. Regulations, as Rizvi you put it, finance, third one is consumer behavior. When we look at regulations and finance worldwide, because of too much emphasis on carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, most of the investments went towards renewable energy and energy efficiency across the world. Very little financing is actually directed towards circular economy. As Catherine was mentioning, there is a lot more need to be done in circular economy of textiles. Muthu was talking about bringing these financial solutions to the ground level. So it actually confirms that finance is not at all reaching to the circular economy practices and desired outcomes. So in terms of war stories, not long ago, let me, for the benefit of the audience, many stock exchanges mandated or advised the companies to provide or produce environmental, social, and governance reports, in short, ESG reports, annually. So Singapore, London, New York, as well as many other jurisdictions, this is the direction followed with the stock exchanges. But the community that is involved in environmental, social, and governance reporting, they primarily focus on diversity. They focus limited on environmental aspects. They also focus more on showcasing how they are switching to renewable energy, energy efficiency. They have a limited or a zero understanding of circular economy. So this is one war story for you. I was completely surprised. They have a limited knowledge about circular economy. So at the recent United Nations meeting in Nairobi, they were talking about setting limits to the production. Most likely in 2 years from now, that is 2024, COP might accept that setting the limits on the production. So bringing back to your question, these war stories essentially convince me that we need forums like Gale Forum, as well as a lot more engaging discussions with the community about circular economy. Let's ask ourselves a question. How many countries mandate you must have certain amount of recycled content in your products? Second, how can we bring the cost of recycled material to the same level as virgin materials? It's actually one of the toughest problems. That's the reason why recycling industry is not picking up, because virgin materials for a long time benefited from subsidies, and they are able to bring down the costs. Whereas the recycling technologies are relatively new, they haven't reached the scaled up levels. And the question is, how do you level up the cost of recycled materials with the virgin materials through the regulations and financing, test bidding, and scaling up? Then I think we will see a fundamental shift in circular economy, which is design. As Muthu was saying, 30% of the food waste is generated at the production level, also at the consumption level. So that's huge. While the world is suffering from food supply, accentuated by recent conflict in Ukraine, we feel very sad for the conflict. And also post-COVID, most economies are focusing on reviving the economy, but somehow they're sidestepping climate change goals, which is evident from the financing that is going towards. At the same time, the emphasis they're making by the governments as well as the corporations. So what I would like to say is we need to be more ambitious and continue to believe that circular economy enables us to reach climate carbon emission reduction targets. And we need a much more robust regulations supported by financing. Another important aspect is financing need to come along with insurance. So insurance industry also has not picked up around the world, including ASEAN. So my view is I hope to see that all these three of them accelerate more pace with further commitments. And then later on, we could see progress.
Okay. Thanks, Prof, for sharing your views on this. Now, so looking at all the impact of the changes, the challenges that this Muthu was mentioning, especially also what Catherine said about this, and in particular, Prof, what you mentioned about effective change through legislation and through other systemic changes. Now, the part about changes through legislation really resonates with my own views, mainly because of what I've seen, how it can actually make a significant impact. So maybe I will conclude with this. If I can ask each of you to maybe articulate one wish, right? One wish of a change that you would like to see that will help to make the circular economy more effective. Okay, so maybe we'll start with Catherine.
In the textile industry, I think I mentioned about one point is the production of textiles and garments mainly located in the East, in Asia. And then the consumption is, of course, globally. Yeah. So when we are doing circular economy, so we need to collect what is being used around the world and then bring them to the production location, recycle them, remake them into new clothing, and then send it out to everyone in the world to consume. So my biggest wish is we can have a good solution to reduce the logistics, whether it's talking about carbon emission and definitely cost, and also fuel consumption. All these could be reduced. This is one big topic that being discussed in the industry right now, whether because of this situation, especially there's very limited production available in the Western countries nowadays, but then a huge population that are consuming different materials. So this is I think the wish is we can have people who's willing to invest in producing or manufacturing all these recycling units around the world, then helps to reduce these logistics issues by shipping it back and forth. That actually doesn't bring any positive impact to the environment. So I think more people to be willing in investing in setting up all these recycling units with hopefully government support. Because I think there are a lot of issues or legislation that's being set up in Europe and hopefully soon in the Americas as well. In Europe, they have the legislation in preventing or prohibiting textile and apparel waste to be dumped in landfill or incinerated from January 1st, 2025. So there are a lot of work needs to be done immediately to resolve this waste management in Europe. And so hopefully more people get involved and support the circular ecosystem to be available to and more accessible to everyone globally. So this would be my prime wish.
Thank you, Catherine. So maybe Prof, right?
Yeah.
Let's hear your wish.
Yes. I make a broad statement, which is any regulation is as effective until it is fully implemented. My wish list is I hope to see there is aggressive targets in terms of recycled content in our products. That's the first wish list. Second one, I hope to see that all the financing is somehow tied to sustainability. While we know there's a lot of debates on the claims and the metrics, but linking all the financing to the sustainability understanding and progress is extremely important in the direction. Third one is in terms of consumer behavior. Again, it's debatable, but it's a wish list from a professor. I would like to see a personal carbon footprint. Is there a limits that we can set, both in developed countries as well as developing countries, so that it provides a certain direction, but it be fought with lots of discussion, debates, and contentious views, because there is no consensus about carbon footprinting in a range of areas. Nevertheless, we're basically saying that's the way to go. If I had to give an analogy, we all will say we want to be happy. If you say, what is that you wish for your children? You say, I want them to be happy. But most people don't understand, including me, what exactly is happiness, right? So that's what it is. It's about, it's good for the planet, it's good for the current generation and the future generation. That's why I think we could start having the debate with intended targets, or at least wish list of setting a personal carbon limits for everyone around the world. I know it's a difficult thing to do, but it's a wish list. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Okay, so Muthu, what about you? What's your wish?
Yeah, so before I make my wish, I just want to make a couple of points.
Okay.
Just to give some more context to what would be what would be my wish. First, picking on from Prof's remarks about recycle. So for long, economic prosperity has always been linked to a linear approach of take from the planet, the natural resources, make, and then waste, right? So, and that has always been the linkage to economic prosperity. You draw more natural resources, you make more things, and then you essentially waste. Now, the pandemic has helped us to rethink about that to a certain extent. So I think we should decouple the economic prosperity pursuit from this linear approach and probably minimize this take, make, waste, and slowly eradicate that approach. And then look at how do we recycle resources, right? And several manufacturing companies, including what Catherine talked about, textiles, the waste is looked as an unnecessary residue. But if you can actually upcycle the wastage to what we want to do, so we call that as valorization. So if you are able to upcycle the wastage or the byproducts into a value-added products, and that will tremendously save wastage. So that is one. The second is when people want to improve their sense and sensibility on sustainability, leave the world in a good shape for future generation, they have to have a minimum living income. Today, for example, again, picking up from Asia, Asia is the rice belt for the world. And there are roughly 150 million farmer families who are below living income. About 95% of them are below poverty line. When I say below poverty line, it is $1.90 per day of income for a family. When I say living income, it is 3 to 3.5 times of the poverty line wages, which is roughly $7 a day for a family. When people are hungry, I don't think they will have a sense and sensibility to look at something beyond themselves. So poverty alleviation through livelihood improvement for farmers who are essentially producing food for the world has to happen. So in that context, my wish would be to have an active, ambitious, joint cooperation between private players across the world, the NGOs, civil societies across the world, and the governmental agencies and financial institutions to come together in a concerted effort to ensure that we are able to collectively improve the livelihood of farmers who are giving us everyday nutrition. Thank you.
Thank you, Muthu. Okay, I guess we have gone through quite a lot on some of the problems that plague the intended effectiveness of the circular economy, some of the challenges quite strongly articulated in this panel, and what are some of the changes that we want to see. Now, of course, I must also admit that some measures have already been put in place to actually address this problem. So, okay, I mean, if I can just summarize, just based on a few of the conclusions that I've drawn, in order to implement, effective change, okay, there's a cost involved. Now, I gather from Prof that financing is actually selectively, shall we say, available, right? And also taking from what Catherine says, financing support for the smaller enterprises is actually a lot more desired. A lot more needs to be available. So the financing bit. And I think drawing on from what Muthu said, a greater deal of communication, cooperation, dialogue, understanding, and maybe a willpower to actually make a change from the current system seems to be required. So I guess we have a little bit of time. So I would like to perhaps open up a discussion on any of the panelists. If you have anything that you want to discuss, which perhaps burning in the back of your mind, and you want to bring it out there, then please feel free. Let's see how we can actually add to the conversation that we've already have. Anybody? Prof, I believe you expressed some views earlier.
Yes, we all know that ASEAN and Asia is going to be the future driver of economic growth, which also means all the systems are still linear economy based. We're going to generate a lot more waste in Asia. One way to achieve this is there should be a lot more cooperation among the countries and the organizations and institutions. So I hope that debates like this, conversations like this, would encourage regional cooperation more strongly. It's necessary. For example, if I have a recycling plant, which is, for example, PET bottles, I would need a certain quantity for recycling as well as making it viable. So I might have to shift some of the waste across the boundaries and make the plant viable. That requires a good mutual understanding and working together without politicizing these issues. Second, for example, financing regulations, even though they are there, there's a lot more incoherence. So again, there must be a goodwill. So we should work towards that. And third level is at the consumers level. It's almost their right. They feel they want to have good life, so they automatically link it to going to the malls, consuming as much as they can. So here again, one need to have a lot more information sharing from the industries, from the companies. They often find it difficult to disclose all the information because of the competition and confidentiality. But then we need to move forward. We need to make information more readily understood by the consumer. I'm sure fellow panelists would know there's a nice labels on the packaging where what things we buy, but actually very difficult for a common man to comprehend what does that mean. So they need to come out with a much better way of helping the consumers to make the choice.
Yes, I can see that. So, Prof, are you saying that education and awareness, not only must it be more widespread, it's got to be more simple to understand, right? More simple,
Exactly.
More simple to understand, more accessible, and maybe it's not just the consumer level. Maybe it's also needs to reach the policymakers, people who need to know what is the problem at the ground level, at the consumer level, so that they can start to make implement effective change from the top down. And I think this.
Rizvi, you really put the nail on the head. You know, most of the policymakers were educated 30, 40 years ago. Sorry to say, maybe 20 years ago. At the time, we were not even teaching sustainability in the schools near the universities. So that means they really don't have an understanding except picking up some stories from the media and newspapers and maybe some one or two policy papers. But they really don't have a stronger grounding in these things. And so you actually bring up a very important thing. It's about through education, you change the culture. Once you have achieved the cultural shift, then you actually get the economic transformation.
And I think to a certain extent, it will address the concerns raised by Catherine, in a sense that, Catherine, you mentioned about micro enterprises and the difficulties that they face in receiving financial support, where especially if they want to rely on new technologies to change the way they recycle material for textiles and apparels. I mean, if I got what you said correctly, and I think to this extent, this kind of awareness and understanding, right, would actually help to make things easier for people to understand the difficulties that the smaller enterprises face, and what is actually required in order to make to realize whatever intentions and plans that they have to help fulfill this circular economy, especially in the textiles and apparel industry. Would that be a fair statement?
I would say so. Actually, I absolutely agree, because in the textile world, there are big entities who have chain stores around the world, or big factories who can produce hundreds of tons of materials a day. There are also tiny, small boutiques that is sitting on the corner of the streets next to your home. There are a lot of those retailers available. And then in circular economy, we're talking about collection. It's the start of the process, right? So I think a lot of different entities and businesses, they need, some of them, they might not be involved in such high-tech technologies and science in their businesses or day-to-day operation, but then still needs a lot of support in helping them in what they can do. I mean, they can of course set up a collection system with their standard customers, but then what's next? I think this education and then transparency is very, very important. We talk about a lot in collaboration instead of competition. uh, Businesses have to work together in order to make things work. So from our institution, we do one big part of our role is to educate and help to liaise between different industry stakeholders to work together, bring ideas together, because we need different perspective, because every stage of the value chain faces different difficulties. But then, if one part of the chain does not work, then we all like everyone in the whole chain should work together and come to find a solution as a team, to work on a resolution. So I think education definitely not only from the top down approach, but also in the level that we communicate between each other in the same level collectively.
Yes, exactly. So Mutu, just to maybe sum up what has been discussed, more dialogue, more feedback, more sharing of concerns, difficulties, challenges, ideas, right? Understanding people's problems. You talk, I know you spoke at length on the difficulties faced by small farmers, right? And your wish list, what needs to be done and all that. I think we are probably in consensus here on some of the, shall we say, preferred solutions. And I think suffice to say, number one, it's going to take a lot of effort to change the mindset, to to get people to say, okay, let's stop what we're doing and then start to understand it, so that we can, when we restart, we go forward in the correct direction. Maybe that's one way of looking at it. Another way is to say, okay, look, how much resources do we want to devote to building up this new mindset, this new way of thinking? And then the most challenging thing which I keep hearing from Prof, the changing of the consumer mindset. Because at the end of the day, the supply and demand stage, when we're talking about the supply stage, the demand from the consumer is what ultimately decides how much of this is going to change, is going to matter, right? And so I guess that will be the most challenging part, I think. And as I said, from a lawyer's perspective, I'm so happy to see that some conduct, some behavior has been influenced, has been, shall we say, motivated to change through the implementation of legislative action. You know, and I feel that if that has been effective in several countries with significant impact, then I think that perhaps as a start, a small start, that could be the starting point here. And of course, any legislative change has to originate from a place of understanding the problem and how to actually address that problem through some kind of thoughtful and meaningful process of understanding the problem in the first place. Okay, and with that, I think we are a wrap. Thank you very much, everyone, for spending your time with us this morning. I hope you had as meaningful enjoying this time with us to understand and to discuss the problems raised. Thank you very much again for spending your time with us.